Today I'm going to make the case for why you still need second citizenship or even multiple citizenships in 2022, a year that the pandemic has largely subsided and the world is reopening. It's time not to get lulled into a sense of false confidence. So I came across an interesting comment recently that largely sums up my thoughts on why having second citizenship and multiple citizenships is so important in this crazy world that we're living in right now. The guy said, had a chat with somebody about having multiple passports. They, this other person, doubted the utility. They forgot that in 2020 and 2021, how having multiple passports would allow one to move to places that weren't as authoritarian than others. People truly have a goldfish memory. Some skipped all restrictions by going to Brazil in 2020 where there were no restrictions, then came back to the UK in 2021 when it was looser than Brazil at that time. And the comment goes on about all the different reasons why having second citizenship is valuable. That could mean because you want to have a place that's going to let you in, unless your second passport's in Australia, that's going to let you in a time of chaos. That time of chaos could be a pandemic, it could be a war, it could be civil unrest, it could be any number of other things. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that because there's some civil unrest in the United States that your passport from the United States is going to become unusable and countries won't take you in. I mean, even Venezuela still has halfway decent visa-free travel, although I bet they really get harassed at every border if they can even get the passport from their government. That's the bigger issue. So I'm not going to tell you that your passport's going to become utterly worthless, but I certainly think that you want a place to go when times get tough. And so I wanted to go through all the utility even as the world comes to reopen and some of the more authoritarian policies have started to subside. If it's your first time here, my name is Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consultancy that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best, which means increasing your freedom with things like second passports, increasing your financial freedom with lower taxes, diversified assets around the world. You can learn more about all of it at nomadcapitalist.com, and we also host the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live. So for me, as someone who comes from the West and who talks to a lot of Westerners and who hears from a lot of Westerners, I got to be perfectly honest. Having seen the perspective in places like Latin America, Eastern Europe, parts of Asia, there's a different built-in culture of we don't trust our country. And so when you talk about lowering your taxes to someone who is from Ukraine or Russia or Thailand or Argentina, they're like, yeah, our country's corrupt. They waste our money. Why not? Of course you should lower your taxes. And there's plenty of people in those kinds of countries that lower their taxes just by illegally not paying. I don't recommend doing that. But that's just a different culture, right? I mean, where I come from, the U.S., you want to do things properly, and I believe in doing things properly and above board. And for me, the matter was I want to go somewhere where I can be above board and keep more of my money, preserve more of my freedom. But yet, I think a lot of folks from the West are like, hey, things will always get better. There's like great kind of American optimism, perhaps in some folks, of it's always going to get better. And no doubt, I think you can build your business bigger. I think you can have a better lifestyle. And even if you don't move overseas, I'm sure that times, if you create good times, you'll have good times. Nothing wrong with that. But the idea is that the Western world has this idea, I'll leave when things get bad enough. We've seen the last couple of years, Americans have, they're up almost 1,000% in terms of applications to citizenship in St. Lucia. You're welcome, St. Lucia. They're up in huge numbers in the Portugal Golden Visa. You see a lot of Americans going and getting second passports, getting second residence, opening offshore bank accounts. For the longest time, the average American is like, why do I need this? I'm American, it's the best, it never gets any better. And they didn't realize that for the last 20 years, your government's been taking away your freedoms. There's been a lot of challenges. The world has changed, right? The global economy is changing. More and more countries around the world are competitive, and you want to keep up with that by not just staying isolated in one country that, statistically speaking, the economy is becoming less free. Your personal freedoms are going down. Your passport is not really increasing in value as much as many other passports. And during the pandemic, you had the same passport as a Rwandan, basically, for travel purposes. And so we hear about people from the West who kvetch about they want to get out, and they are less likely to take action than people from emerging countries, from Eastern Europe, Latin America, what have you. And so it's sort of, in my opinion, the alcoholic who has a nice, comfortable place to stay. You're only going to, solve the quote-unquote alcoholism when you're living out in the street in a gutter somewhere. That may be for some people the motivation. I don't want you to be living in the street in the gutter somewhere, and I'm not saying that's how bad it's going to get. But I do think if you're a Westerner, you don't want to have what's called, what he calls goldfish memory, where we somehow forget what's happened over the last couple of years and look at what may happen in the next couple of years. And so, for my approach, follow the trend. When in doubt, zoom out. Look at this century and look at what's happened in the Western world. Your government's spying on you. Look at everything you've got to do at the airport. I mean, look at all the new reporting obligations and just what they want to do with your bank accounts and all the new requirements that you have to follow. Look at how you couldn't leave your own country in some cases. You couldn't come back to your own country. Countries weren't renewing passports. Even if you could get out, they wouldn't renew your passport or issue you a new one to leave. They're trying to make getting a passport more difficult in some countries. Other countries like Canada and the UK have threatened that they want to basically take away your ability to have a passport at all if you don't meet certain conditions. And in the US, they already do that if you have a delinquent tax debt, which I don't recommend that you do, but who knows, there's various ways you can come about that. And so fewer and fewer and fewer freedoms, and the politicians are becoming more and more bold. They're literally coming out and saying, yeah, you know what, we wouldn't mind canceling this group of people's nationality. And they always leave the door open in some way. Yeah, it's terrorists and, anybody else we don't like, basically. Or let's not issue passports if you're a tax deadbeat or, you didn't pay your parking tickets or whatever, or you went and urinated in a fountain at a football match somewhere. Let's not give you a passport. The politicians are more and more bold because the people, look at the numbers in Canada. We talked to a lot of folks in Canada now who are concerned what's happening in their country for a number of reasons. But the average Canadian is in favor of what's happening. And so those are the people who can just say, yeah, I love that the politicians are speaking out against we need higher taxes. I love that they're speaking out against fewer freedoms. Restrict our freedoms, take it away. But when in doubt, zoom out. Look at this century, look at the last 20 years and ask yourself, are you freer now than you were 20 years ago? The answer in the Western world is absolutely not. And you can say that's true everywhere, and there may be some data points for that. But if you look at the economic freedom, you have post-communist countries. They were communists within your lifetime that are now more economically free, statistically speaking, than, let's say, the United States. Certainly more so than many other Western economies as well. And so what I want you to do is understand that whatever freedoms we have now can always be taken away. And what I feel is, knowing that I have different places to go, that I enjoy spending time, that perhaps I have business interests in, where I enjoy the lifestyle, have a home, whatever. I have set up numerous places around the world, largely in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Asia, and in Latin America. And I have a good sense of other places in, let's say, Western Europe and maybe a few places in Africa, East Asia, where I could go and I could buy a home or adapt somehow. So I've got all these places I can go. And as a result of that, having multiple passports, bank accounts, no matter what happens in my country, I feel pretty safe. And so even though perhaps freedom in many countries is dwindling, for me, I look at, if I've got 6 different places for where to live, the odds are one of those places is going in the right direction. And I've seen that over the last couple of years where I have moved where the personal freedom was. I could have moved where I was able to go out and go to the grocery store. And I did a pretty good job. I was traveling throughout the pandemic to places where I could live my life. And so Canadians necessarily couldn't do that. Australians couldn't do that. And so the fact that Australia's open or Canada's back open, the word that they used in Canada was we're suspending some of the requirements. We're suspending some of the restrictions. Sounds like some of those restrictions may come back. Now, I don't like to be a doomsdayer, but we have literally seen in Canada, you're restricted in terms of your movements. Your finances could be restricted. And it didn't happen to everybody, but it happened to some. And people cheered it, and the politicians used it to their advantage. And so will that come back? What I don't want people to do in any case is people so often say, oh, Joe Biden got elected. You should have seen this channel, Our Business, when Joe Biden got elected, went through the roof. People couldn't get appointments. It was so busy. But yet, what I've been saying for a decade is Joe Biden or whomever else is next is coming. The trajectory in your country is the things Joe Biden or whatever other left-wing politician wants, that's what they want. And it's everywhere in the Western world. Wealth tax, as little as £500,000 British pounds, let's hit you with a one-off tax. Or in the US, let's start taxing your unrealized capital gains. Let's go back in time and apply retroactive taxes. They want to do that in California. They have done that in some cases. And so all these politicians are looking for the next way to restrict your freedom and take more of your own money. And they're only waiting until the next excuse. They give you back some freedom. They back off a tax proposal. You think it's the end of it? It's like the movie. The narrator says it wasn't the end of it. And it's not the end of it. Do not allow some feeling of reprieve to shape you and say, oh my goodness, everything's perfect here again. Do you really believe everything is perfect in your country? And if the answer is yes, then you probably never needed the thing in the first place. I don't want people to overreact and get a second passport, get a second residence, diversify their finances, just because they get emotionally freaked out by some event that maybe won't even impact them, right? I mean, Joe Biden getting elected, yes, makes it more likely that taxes are going up, freedoms are going to be restricted, whatever. By the way, Republicans have done the same thing, and I'm sure if you're not in the United States, both sides of the aisle have done stuff to take away your freedoms, take more of your money, make your life more difficult. Okay? There is a geographical solution for pretty much every problem that you have. And if you set up your plan Bs, if you protect yourself against future black swan events, all you've got to do is look throughout the last couple of years, the last 20 years to see this is the trend. If you don't believe that, then stay and props to you, in all honesty. But if you see that the trend is going the wrong direction with finances and freedom, then you want to have places where you can go. For me, it's a handful of places. For you, it might be one to start. But do not allow this idea of, hey, everything's back to normal now. It's not back to normal. It's just waiting for the next shoe to drop. Your government has always treated you like cattle, and so now you get to fight back. If you have only one citizenship, whatever they decide is what you deal with. If you have 2 or 3, then you have more of the power. You're shifting the power to yourself the more diversification you have. I have a bank account in Canada. Now, I don't live in Canada, and I'm not out there doing the stuff that Justin Trudeau didn't want. But I do talk about Canada in this channel. But you know what? So little of my assets are in Canada. All right, it's sitting there, it's diversification, and I'm not going to worry about it. But if you're 100% in Canada and you're living there, you got a problem. And if you think Canada's getting worse, then you want to have this diversification. Don't let a reprieve, don't let a temporary feeling of safety stop you from looking at the greater trend of what you need to do. I believe if you have wealth, if you have a high income, and if you're someone who doesn't necessarily agree with the big government idea, then in the Western world, you need to move some of the money and have a way to move your money out, move yourself out. Because, again, just waiting for the next shoe to drop.